civil rights and trial attorney Adanté Pointer. And Adanté, to my point here, you know, oftentimes when you run into prosecutors, I mean, by nature, and I think by force, meaning when they work in the office, you kind of have to take a black and white approach to things. But there's often these cases with real gray areas, and I guess that's why they end up in trial. That's why we were in a trial in this case. But I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. I think in this scenario, you have obviously a young man who was in some ways being led by the nose. You know, he clearly was infatuated with this woman, and she was leading him on to some extent. But the question is, where is the line? Where do you cross the line? And I think what the jury is going to have to wrestle with is, despite, you know, the line of work that she's in, despite obviously this young man being very smitten with her, despite the idea that she was leading him on, and she herself admitted on the stand that she had mental health issues, the question is, did he take advantage of those issues, or was he victimized by those issues? And that's what the jury's going to have to wrestle with. But it's about crime and punishment. And here I imagine he was looking at a very stiff sentence. It's hard for me to understand, and I think I heard you all mention it earlier, how this case did not result in some sort of plea bargain. I think there's exposure and risk on both sides. If the jury is sympathetic to him, then they come back with some type of compromise verdict with the criminal trespass, which is what the defendants want. If they, on the other hand, if the jury comes back and they say, look, you clearly crossed the line, you were a creep, you were creeping in this woman's house, then it's going to be guilty on all counts, and it's going to be a hard road for him going forward with his life with that on his record.
But Adanté, I think you just nailed it when you said, really, they just decided to leave it to the jury, because part of the closing, and it was hard to hear some of the audio, but let me share some of our notes from our team listening to the closing argument, that the prosecutor said the defense wants you to hold him accountable for trespassing, the lesser crime. But we, the state, he's getting more and more frustrated with his relationship with the victim. It's not going well, and he needs to be found guilty of burglary. So that's where the rubber meets the road. They wouldn't agree. It's a lesser charge. His age, he has no priors. On the other hand, this whole defense, Adanté, tell me what you think of the prosecution rather saying, okay, she may not be a likable victim, but he crossed a line and it's burglary. Do you agree or not with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, I can accept that. You know, and I was a private criminal defense attorney for a number of years, representing a whole bunch of people in different courts, you know, being tasked with his attorney with trying to come up with a defense in a way to make sense out of this crime and punishment. However, I think at such a young age for him to be going to these extents, you know, copying keys, taking videos, staying and living in her attic, taking pictures from the hallway, wanting to repossess a gift that he supposedly gave her in the TV, I can see why a prosecutor would be very concerned. You know, we have to essentially put our foot down now, because this didn't end up in a tragic consequence, but what if it did? And so I can understand why the prosecution is taking a hard line. I also understand the idea of redemption. And so, you know, there has to be a balance. We'll see where it comes out.
Yeah, and that's what I was referring to in terms of the black and white and the gray. Prosecution sees it straightforward. This is a kid that needs to be put away because something bad could have happened, and if we don't do something now, will happen in the future. The other side looking at it like this is just a young kid who was smitten, and given the right circumstances, this won't happen again.
And I think this is what the jury's going to be debating over and deliberating. Now, we know, again, they have gone home for the day, and they'll be back tomorrow to continue their deliberation. Up next, we want to take a look at what the defendant said about his relationship with the victim. That's our testimony of the day.
And then a little bit later,